You're listening to the Gutsy Podcast, where we talk about all things real, raw, and ridiculous about running a business authentically. I'm Laura Wallace, also known as the Laura Aura, lover of all things inspirational, owner of Works Graphic Design, and your host on this journey through entrepreneurship. I'm here to help you get out of your head and back into action as a passionate business rock star. Tune in every Tuesday and Thursday as we fuel your Gutsy. So you are working hard day and night. You are pounding things out like they are your job because let's face it, it kind of is, right? Yet on the inside, you feel like a complete train wreck. You are anxious. You are overwhelmed. You've got so many things going on that you feel like if you turn your head the wrong direction, all the sand's going to drop. So how do we set those boundaries? How do we endure discomfort to make changes that lead us to feel like we can live a large and fearless life? I mean, can we truly work smarter and not harder and also feel fulfilled? Guys, I am so excited because today on the Gutsy Podcast, we have our first ever guest, Heather Tydings, and she is going to dig into all these things. She is the owner of Own Your Evolution. She's a psychotherapist and certified Martha Beck life coach for women and teen girls who want to live a soulful, mindful, and potent life. She works with them to design a vibrant life by turning into their internal wisdom using mindfulness practices and spirituality. She presents as an extrovert, but she is a true empath, which I can completely relate to, and has a deep abiding need for quietness and stillness. She's a mama bear to an adorable 11-year-old son, a writer, a Pilates lover, and a lifetime vegetarian. Heather, welcome to the Gutsy Podcast.
Thank you, Laura, baby. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. This is a joy for me, and I know for all of our guests. So all right, icebreaker. Fun fact, you met Oprah. So we need to talk about that.
I totally did meet Oprah.
How did that happen?
Oh, well, I started getting into vision boarding kind of as an experiment after I think I saw Martha Beck on Oprah. So I started to play with vision boards, and I was going through a really big transitional period of my life. And I created one, and on the vision board, I put a picture of Miss Winfrey in a big bold purple sweater. And I thought, I'm going to meet her. She kind of grew me up. I learned so much about life and myself through watching her show in my teen years. And I wanted to meet my mother, though she didn't know she was my mother. And so funny, I found out that she opened the window on her website for one day a month. And you had to go and put your information in. You had to watch it every day and put your information in to get on her show. And so I did that for about a year, and I was not giving up. They did not call me. And finally I thought, this is brilliant because you could put your name and 4 other people's names. So I called 3 of my girlfriends and said, I will let you know when the window opens up every month. I want us all to go in. We'll all put our names in. So we, quadruple our chances of getting on the show. And so it worked. And Miss Winfrey called and invited us to her show, and it was on the Amanda Knox story, actually. So my girlfriends and I flew to Chicago, and the whole time I was manifesting that I was going to meet her, and they were like, "That's cute, that's really cute. You're actually not going to meet her." And I'm like, "No, I am." And I honestly I felt very convinced that Miss Winfrey and I were going to have a hug, and so. We get to Chicago and we go to her chef's restaurant. I'm like, can we send her dessert to her penthouse? And they're like, okay. So everyone we meet in Chicago, I'm like, we're going to meet Oprah. And my girlfriend sort of giggled like, she's kind of delusional. So we get on the show, we get VIP seating. We have no idea how. We're right behind the Amanda Knox story. Like, I am so close to Oprah, I can see the Fendi on the bottom of her shoe. And at the beginning of the show, she stood up and she's like, welcome to Chicago. I don't meet anybody after the show. I appreciate y'all coming here. And I'm like, that is not my vision. I am going to meet you. And so my Italian girlfriend's at the very end of the row as Oprah's exiting the stage after the show is wrapped up. And I am willing her to grab Oprah's hand and stop her. And she does. And she said, Oprah, we're your girls from Baltimore where you got your start. And she said, I have a girlfriend here and she absolutely has to meet you. And she was like, come on up, Baltimore. And so we went up on stage and her producer came over and got pictures of us. We gave her hugs and we rolled out. And that is how I met Miss Winfrey.
That is insanity to me. Okay, so there's so many things that go into this. Perseverance, resiliency, like literally a year. Like you manifested and dedicated a year of your life to make this moment happen. But it happened. Right?
It totally did. And then she announced during this whole process of me being convinced I was going to meet her that she was like going off air in, I think, 2000, I want to say 10 or 11. And so it was even more tenacious with like, no, I'm going.
I love it. I'm one of these days, me and Miss Winfrey will be rubbing elbows too.
Hang out with me, sister.
You got it. So take me back. Tell me a little bit about how you got started as an entrepreneur. What's the story?
So I was working for a healthcare company for a lot of years, late at night, and I kept being pulled to the Martha Beck life coaching program. That was about 2008, and I kept going to her website, and I thought, this program is for people who have it all together. It's too much money. It's for high rollers. It's not for me. I'm not enough to, get into this program. Finally, about 4 years later, it just kept pulling me. And so I signed up, and it's like a 9-month program, 10-month program. And during the life coach training, I just felt the pull that it was time to create my own thing. And she had a lot of business coaches. So I just learned slowly how to create my own business. And that's what I did. I did it really slowly. I went down from 40 hours to 20 hours. Every day I would do like 10 or 15 minutes building my business until I opened my practice in 2013 and have been rocking and rolling ever since.
I love it. So I'm curious about that turning point because you said you felt like you weren't enough, but you ultimately made the decision to invest in this large program. And I know that's something that a lot of entrepreneurs face. They're like, I know and I see this thing that I want to do or could do, but financially I can't do it or something is standing in my way. So what was kind of that turning point for you?
I was in my office at midnight on a Wednesday before the life coaching program closed for the next launch. And I was sort of like a caged animal here. I'd been doing this intense crisis work since 96. So I was pacing around my office and like desperately wanting something new, and fighting the unworthiness demons and the lack. And so I said out loud, I have no idea why, Laura, this came to me, but I am going away this weekend. And I wonder if they'll extend the close. If I see these certain signs, I know it's a go. I have the green light, and I'm gonna sign up no matter what. Just do it. So I asked to see. I have no idea. A bluebird, find a feather, and for I think $8,000 or $10,000 to fall into my lap. I mean, I made the stakes really high. So my then husband came home, and they did extend it a week. He came home and said he randomly got this $10,000 raise. That was on Friday. We went away to the Eastern Shore that weekend. And as I was walking, I found this large feather, not unusual. I was like, oh my gosh, I asked for this. And then when we got home, my neighbor, she was 4 at the time. She came outside. I was dumping the cooler out, sort of, unpacking from the weekend. And she started to tell me how she was looking up at my house and there was a bluebird sitting on my balcony. And her father came out and said, it was so weird. We saw these gorgeous Eastern bluebirds sitting on your balcony this weekend. And I was like, I totally asked for those. And then I said to universe, but I didn't see them. So the next day I was going to the grocery store and I was coming home through my neighborhood and this bluebird literally skimmed my windshield and flew off. I was like, all right, done. 10,000, whatever it was, $10,000 in the program. And I signed up.
Wow.
You like how I do my life.
I love how you do life. Yeah, because it's how I do life as well. So it's nice to know that I'm not the only one that asks for feathers.
No,
so I'm curious.
And
I would bet that this is kind of a new concept for a lot of people, like tuning in and manifesting and asking for signs and all that stuff. Some people might think that that's kind of woo-woo, and that's totally okay.
Yeah.
But when you tap into it, there's a ton of power with it. So what are some things that you coach through some of your clients in how to tap into that portion of your life?
Well, it is woo-woo, and it does, ask you to suspend disbelief, to go into a different realm that is unseen and unheard in a lot of ways. And so I never try to convince anybody that this is the way, right? So what I ask them to do in session, if they're open to it, is just to experiment with it so they can prove that maybe I'm completely wrong, with this way of creating an intention and then just showing up and noticing where the hot tracks start to, show up for you, where the breadcrumbs are laid out in front of you. So that's the verbiage I use. Just experiment with this. You don't have to believe it. In fact, don't believe it, but at least play with it and just see if anything opens up. If it doesn't, you're right. If it does, well, you have this whole other field to play in.
So what's a first thing that someone could do? Like what can someone do to maybe try and incorporate this into their life?
Let me think of a good client example I've had. So I guess when it feels like when they're in session and it feels like there are no other avenues and they're really grappling with something big, and I don't have the answer, right? So I don't have the answer on which way to go. I ask them to state a very clear intention before they leave the session, and then ask them to notice what shows up. So what happened? Something just happened recently. And I remember saying, can you believe that opened up for you? But I'm not recalling the...
Well, even just like your birds, right? Like you yourself set a very specific intention, something that's kind of very visually measurable. So it's not just even a feeling, but it's something very physical. And then they showed up. So it's almost like a checkpoint along the line to say, yep, you were in the right space doing the right thing at the right time.
And often like a book will show up, or, angels in the form of human beings will say something to them about an opportunity for a new job that they didn't have that was absolutely not in their awareness. And then they explore that and it's a viable option, and they're in a toxic work environment. So they go and interview on a whim thinking they're not good enough, but go and they just keep showing up for the next thing. And that may not pan out, but maybe that leads to something else. And so to ask and then really show up and follow what is presented. I think that's the big thing, is asking, but you also have to really keep your eyes and heart open, because when you ask, things show up for you.
So true. I'm always fascinated that when I'm in a certain place, I'll start a book, for instance, and I'll sit it down for like 3 weeks and forget about it accidentally. And I'll go and I'm like, you know what, I'm going to read today, and I'll open up a chapter and the words are exactly what I need in that exact moment pertaining to the exact scenario that I'm going through. And that's kind of one of those fun little, like, if you're tuned into it, there's a lot of power in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Or a song will come on that you've heard 8,000 times. One of my clients just said this about a month ago. She's on her Peloton bike. And
I'm a fan.
And a song called Home. And she was crying and just grieving, a big marital transition. And the song that she's heard so many times, and she said, but I heard it with new ears and it settled into my spirit, and I knew I was going to be okay, because I intended to find calm, and it's exactly what I needed to hear. And my nervous system could settle, and I just felt at peace with, I am in my home. I am home. So if my literal home changes, that's okay.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So how does that play into business? How do you feel like that could be a tool that business owners, particularly entrepreneurs, could utilize?
Well, this is going to be really out on woo-woo. My own way, I did start a business several years ago, and it was a very typical startup with, the business model and all the steps that one can go through to create a new business and abundance. And it was so not my way. My way really is intuitive hits and paying attention. So recently, I had this wonderful space that I loved for several years, but I just kept feeling this tug to explore a new space closer to home. And there was there wasn't anything bad happening at the old space, but I knew enough that the charge in me was strong enough that I needed to go out and explore. And I followed it. And long story short, now I'm in this new, gorgeous, light-filled, peaceful, safer space just because I followed my intuition, just because there was the charge in me to make change. It was time to make change for a lot of different reasons. So that is the real woo-woo way of how I follow my intuition. And I do it with even taking clients. When a client calls or emails and finds me, I feel into my body whether, is this a green light? Is this a yes? And really from the first interaction, I feel like, okay, this is at least a step forward or not a good fit for maybe them or me. And I just have learned to listen to it because when I don't, and I haven't for, I don't know, I hadn't for a long time. And it was always revealed to me later, maybe not initially, why I should have followed that gut knowing that I shouldn't take that or I shouldn't go in that direction. Is that way too woo-woo?
Nope. I can get real woo-woo. So it's really about feeling. So a lot of times we talk about the feelings of bricks or butterflies. So when you have that really heavy brick, low sinking feeling, something usually is not right versus a very light, kind of upper, almost makes you want to puke kind of feeling, is almost like its own version of a green light to say, yes, you're in the right place. This might feel scary, but it's not a bad scary. It's an exciting scary.
So well stated. I think reliable intuition, the information comes through more neutrally. It feels right in your gut. There's a lightness to it a lot of times. It has a really affirming tone to it. And then if it's different than the irrational fear, which is that kind of highly emotionally charged or really demanding sense. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It sure does. So today we're talking lots about high functioning anxiety. So entrepreneurs specifically, business owners, and just people in general, everyone is hustling at 100 miles an hour faster than they should be every day. They're doing a lot of stuff. And they feel like if they're not doing a lot of things, they don't feel accomplished. Mm-hmm. So talk to me a little bit about it from a psychotherapist standpoint about the concept of high functioning anxiety and maybe some things that we can do to nix that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think when you're overtaken by the anxiety, you're not going to function well and make good decisions anyway. There is an element of being energized, and to move you forward, that momentum that's very energizing. But when you're literally hijacked by anxiety and you're making decisions a large percentage of the time, you're not making really clear, informed decisions. And so for me, when I get in that crackly, I've overstepped the threshold from the energized, juiced anxiety, you can call it anxiety, into crunchy, fatigued, worn out anxiety. I know it is time for me, no matter what my, what the drive and motivation is telling me, I have to settle and seal for a while because I'm not going to make good decisions. And so for me personally, and everyone has their own way to settle their nervous system. My way is to go out in nature. I can ground into the earth. There's the Japanese term forest bathing, going out into the earth, and nothing seems to matter as much when I'm out in nature. Like the bigness of the earth, it sort of drains the over crispy charge out of me, and I can return maybe the next day or 2 days later feeling like, okay, there's more clarity. Now I know what to do with this energy instead of just constantly pushing through it.
Yeah. And I think that's what a lot of us do, right? So it takes time to build momentum, whether it's good momentum or bad momentum.
Yeah.
So you're almost creating habits when you're getting into this, like, you're down in the weeds, you're down in the trenches, and you're just like literally pounding it out day in and day out. I think it's the transition of stepping away from that, because we feel like if we stop, then we're gonna lose something.
Absolutely. That is so true. And I find that we do lose something. We start to lose ourselves. We start to come out of our bodies, and we're not doing things in an embodied way, right? We're outside of ourselves. And I don't think we're nearly as effective. And it will take 10 more steps to do something than when we're creating from an embodied place of more stillness.
So how do we break out of that? How do we maybe recognize that we're in it? And then what are some things that we can do to transition out of that mindset?
Of the hustle mindset?
Yeah, of that, just if I don't do all of these things, it's all going to fall apart.
Yeah. I was just listening to another podcast, and this life coach was talking about slacker magic, Abigail Stidley, and I just loved it because she really went into listening to your body's wisdom and that it'll guide you. And there are times when you're pushing forward that you have to pull back and slack. And she didn't say this part, but to rest and rejuvenate when you feel like you need to push harder, it is so counterintuitive to pull back, rest, and rejuvenate for just a period of time so that you move forward with more clarity. So I don't know what do you do when you start to get really crackly? What do you do, Laura? Like, what do you do to pull back?
Well, first I've had to master the art of recognizing it, because for much of my career, I would just go and go and go, and to the point where, like, my body decided for me that I was done. Mm-hmm. I would get sick, or, I would just be down and out for a couple of days, or I wouldn't be able to get off the couch or out of bed. So my first area of success, I think, has been to recognize that, hey, something's got to give, and if I don't reroute something, then my body's gonna go down on me. Yeah. So at that point, for me, it's one, what can I delegate? Mm-hmm. So a lot of times when I'm in that mode, I have absorbed everything because I feel like I have to do everything.
Yeah.
And then if I recognize that I don't have to, I can delegate the things that other people are amazing at and let them help. And then also I need to do something for myself. Yeah. So a lot of times when I'm like super anxious and super overwhelmed, I've not been tuning into myself enough.
Yeah. And I think often another thing is we get to go into those numbing behaviors, whether it's binge watching Netflix or overeating or, even numbing out by answering all of our emails and texts, feeling like we have to get back to everybody. That's always that's usually an indication when we start to numb out that we need to pull back. And I think you made a good point where delegate, but also choice, like really thinking where do I have choice? Because I think when we start to have that momentum and we're going full speed ahead, we forget that we are actually the CEO of our fucking to-do list, right? Like nobody is putting this stuff on our to-do list. We are in charge of it. So where is their choice? Where do I feel like I have to do all these things? And some of them there's deadlines and there are things to attend to, but some of them we actually, when we question them, we don't have to do. What we get caught up, especially women, is in the fear of disappointing other people. And so when we go and look at our list and look at where is their choice and how do I sit with the discomfort of feeling like I'm going to disappoint or not shine, and be okay with the discomfort of perhaps disappointing, or maybe it's just a mind story we're creating, then our to-do list sometimes can be cut down by a third or what's pushing us so hard.
I freaking love the reminder that we have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
That concept almost goes out the window when we're in that high functioning but anxious mindset. Like it's as if we are, you mentioned earlier, like as if we're out of our body. It's almost like this machine has taken over, and our mind and our heart is just like, well, let me know when you're done with that. I'll come back around.
Yeah,
Meanwhile, I'm going to go hang out over here and not function for a while. So
exactly.
knowing that you have a choice to make decisions, you have a choice to delegate, you have a choice to stop and take the afternoon off, or
Yeah.
go into work 2 hours later, or take a long weekend, or even just sit by yourself for 10 minutes. Like it doesn't always have to be an excursion.
Yeah. Or cancel, cancel, postpone. And yes, people don't like that. And I don't mean not, fulfill your commitments. That's not what I'm saying. But there are so many times when you review. I did this a couple weeks ago and I was fried. And I thought, who is running the show? I am running the show. I need to step back and really write down what I think I quote have to do, and where can I edit, where can I eliminate, what can I purge, and what can I add that's going to bring some stillness to me, or I'm going to lose my mind. I mean, I really did have to have this talk with myself in the last couple weeks.
Yeah, and a realization that I've come to as well is, at the end of the day, none of those people are in my mind or in my body and know how I feel. And none of those people care necessarily if I'm burnt out. Now, certainly there are relationships that do. But, theoretically speaking, they're all going home with their own stuff.
Right.
None of them are thinking about how's my mental stability? How's my stress level? What is my load like? What have I overpromised on? Like, ultimately, at the end of the day, that's mine to own.
Mm-hmm.
And if people continue to allow all those things to embed themselves in your mind and in your body, you're the one that's going to have to bury that load. And that's where I think a lot of that anxiety comes from.
Yeah. Well, the next thing to do too is, and I have to do this, is turn toward my anxiety, because what I find often is that when I'm over that line again, where the anxiety is totally running the show and I'm not embodied, I want to run faster because I don't like how I feel. And so that never works, because, what you resist persists, and what you deal with, when you're ready to deal, you can heal. So turn around. And for me, turning around and looking at the anxiety, and what is the message? Like, what is it? Where am I holding it in my body? For me, I can hold it a lot in my chest and in my heart, or my diaphragm. Where are you holding it in your body, and what is the message you're trying to tell me? So turning toward anxiety, initially, it's incredibly uncomfortable. I don't know if you know Jill Bolte Taylor. She wrote A Stroke of Insight, and she talks about how an emotion or a feeling state, when faced, takes about 90 seconds to go through you. You can tolerate the extreme discomfort for 90 seconds. And you feel like when you turn toward anxiety and look in the eye, or fear, or grief or sadness, it is gripping. It feels like your throat's closing a lot. You just want to get out of the feeling state. But really what softens it is turning toward it, looking at it, acknowledging, like an internal nod of yes, feeling it in your body and allowing it to be there, so that it can send you the message that it's supposed to send you, and then leave you.
That's really brilliant. I mean, that whole 90 seconds is really true if you just break it down and think about some of the hardest things that you've had to do, either hard conversations or an initial decision for something, or just like literally walking into something. After that initial thing is over, like your whole body and your mind just kind of settles down in. But it's the mental trip up that we get hung up on.
Yeah. And it's the not wanting to feel. We live in a culture that really teaches us more about moving forward so we don't feel, and numbing out so we don't feel. When we turn and feel, who wants to? It feels terrible. I remember the first time I learned to do it, and I'm like, this is crazy. Who wants to feel this? But ultimately, our emotions march through us to give us, they have wisdom. They have information for us. When we turn toward them, we can hear it. And when we hear it, then we know what direction to take, and then the emotion can leave our body. They don't want to stay, right? We don't want to hold fear and anxiety. We want it to move through us. It's going to come in to all of us, on a pretty regular basis. But the idea is how to learn how to feel it, get its message, and let it pass through us.
So that really ties into your concept of using your body as a compass.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me a little bit about that and how that associates with like making decisions or knowing when to let things go. Because I think sometimes we hold on to things because we're afraid, is it too soon to let something go? Do I need to do something more with this? Tell me a little bit more about the body compass concept.
Well, I learned that from Martha Beck. How to go in, and she taught us how to hold in your mind, almost like a movie you're watching, an event that happened that was painful, not the most painful, as you're learning to do this, but a period in your life or something that happened that had a negative charge to it, and go into your body, literally scan your body from your head to your toes and feel what feels like pain and suffering in your body. And then to also hold in your mind a time in your life that was beautiful and open and free, that just felt juicy and yummy, and feel how that feels in your body. And then also just hold something neutral to see how your body feels when it's neutral. And you will start to notice that in your body, you will register pain, discomfort, and a no in a certain place. Like for me, it was always a no in my body when I really tuned in was always a tightening of the right side of my throat, almost like the words didn't want to come out. And so when I practiced this a lot, because I wanted to learn how to do it myself, but how to teach other people, because ultimately you want your clients to learn to leave knowing themselves how to find their North Star and what feels like a no and a yes. So they're not dependent on psychotherapy or other people. So I practice this with little things. What felt like a no in my body? What felt like a yes in my body? And so I got really good at knowing how my body registered those things. And so when I am making decisions about, for instance, the client to take, or, how to move my business or who to join with, for instance, meeting you, honestly, was such a yes in my body. And then walking into your space, I could feel the lightness and the softness and the ease I felt, even though I was excited. So there was that sort of, slight anxious, energetic charge. There was ease in my system. I knew I was in the right place because I could feel my body settled. A no feels a little sharper, and it feels a little more grippy for most people. Or some people will describe it. Actually, a lot of people will describe it as a weight wherever they hold it in their body. So that is the quick and dirty body compass and how I use it.
I love it. It really goes into, sometimes we mentally make decisions on a whim or in a moment or because of need or how to. But if we can just pause for a second and really learn to feel the situation and have your heart and your body and your mind work together unanimously. Like I love to make decisions off of my gut, but then I also like to fact check with my brain.
Mm-hmm.
Just to make sure that, I feel a lot of things on a daily basis. Yeah. So, even after I've gone through some of those initial steps of, does this feel right? Are those bricks and butterflies? Where am I feeling it in my body? Like you mentioned, then, okay, let's kind of come out of that. And then let's look at the facts afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I even do it like weekend activities now, because for so many years I didn't realize how empathic I was, and I would do things and put my body in places it didn't want to go. And then I would be drained for the week and ineffective. So just as much, like little things, like, do I want to go into that restaurant? Does that feel like the right place to put myself? And recently I overrode it. My fiance wanted to go out to dinner, and I knew I was totally fried. My body compass literally wanted to just tether me to the house. And I overrode it, and there was all kinds of reasons. And I knew, and I went into the restaurant, and it was packed, and it was crowded, and I ran into all kinds of people I knew, and I had no emotional energy left. And I was so anxious the rest of the weekend because my body told me, stay home, rest, rejuvenate. I overrode it to please other people, and I was completely depleted.
And what a surefire like reminder, like, hey, this shit actually works if we work with it.
Yes. And there's an emotional price when we override it a lot of times.
So that also comes with setting boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Especially, the life and business and work and kids and commitments and extracurricular activities and nonprofits and events. We could go on and on and on. So what are some things that you do to help coach some of your clients through setting boundaries for mental health?
For mental health, yeah. Well, I talk to them about really trying to find what their boundary type is, really, or the levels of personal boundaries. So first educating on what soft boundaries are. And so they're usually people who are a lot of times in the healing field, nurses, therapists. They're really giving, nurturing, they please, they're really easily manipulated, and people can kind of get into them with very little effort. And then there's people with really rigid boundaries, and often these are people who they have trauma, or for whatever reason they're very guarded, their heart's very guarded. They don't let anything, they're very closed. They don't let anything in and out. So they never really connect or have a sense of belonging. And then there's mushy boundaries. So they go soft, rigid, soft, rigid. They're back and forth. Ideally, we want to get to flexible boundaries, which are they're very selective, but they're very strong, and they keep you from being or feeling exploited much of the time. And they change. What feels right in one circumstance might not in the next. So I educate them on and get them to identify, like, how do they walk through the world? What kind of boundaries do they have when they walk through the world? And what feels more integrity and aligned for them? And so typically if they have soft or rigid boundaries, it's very different how you work with them, but they're very fearful on changing them because of either fear of intimacy or fear of disappointing people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like there's different levels of boundaries. They can be softer, or they can be like your hard line, like absolute no. So maybe identifying, what are some of your softer, more flexible boundaries, but then also like where do you draw the line? What is a non-negotiable for you?
Mm-hmm. And having them play with setting boundaries in the beginning. Let's say somebody has really soft boundaries and they let everybody cut them off, and they never can finish a sentence. And, the world reflects back to them their soft boundaries. So having them go out in the world and set boundaries with people who don't really impact them, with the Starbucks barista or the person who cuts them off in a sentence or in line. So having them practice how to set these, and they learn they don't die. Like, nobody dies when they set a boundary. Yes, people may be not happy with it, but nothing really bad happens. Or if somebody has super rigid boundaries and they're really closed off to the world, I've had them, and I've actually walked with them at the park and just had them look up and make eye contact with everybody who comes toward them, just to feel what it feels like to walk through the world slightly more open. So that's kind of a starting point when working with different types of boundaries with clients.
I love that. That's really, really powerful. So I feel like therapy in a whole has become just maybe slightly a little bit more, let's say, socially acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
In my opinion, it's 100% acceptable. I'm a huge advocate for therapy. Therapy has helped me through some of the most challenging moments of my life.
Yeah.
Do you see a lot of owners, like business owners and entrepreneurs, what's some misconceptions that you would like to bust a little bit to say, like, hey, you know what, coming to this is not a weakness. This is actually a really powerful tool.
Yeah. Well, I just recently had a guy, very tough, first responder kind of, well, not kind of guy come in. It's really, and I don't usually work with a lot of men, but my body compass said to take this client. And, I think with somebody specifically who's not open to it, but they're in enough suffering that they just are willing to try anything, it's a little easier. But for me, it's a really collaborative approach with them. And as soon as they think that I'm not the superior person telling them how to run their life or what to change, but a collaborative partner with them on how they want to heal, they open up a little bit more if they're resistant to therapy. They especially when I go in and use their wisdom and I ask them what their thoughts are and we hone in on what they already know is true and they feel a part of it, it can change their idea of how therapy is. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Okay.
I think that there's always it. I think one of the most challenging parts of actually going and accepting of going to therapy is the unknown, right? Like anything new that you do, there's an unknown factor. But I feel like a lot of people think that there's a stereotypical thing, like, oh, like my whole life has to be a complete train wreck, or like that's not for me. That's only for that kind of person. And I just feel like there's this stereotype, and I want to help bust that, because a lot of times it's people like you and I.
It is.
Regular people, hardworking people that just are stuck or are tired or don't have the right type of, we all have beautiful friends and family that we can vent to, but they don't necessarily always have the tools and the means to help us overcome those humps.
And I work with mostly really high functioning humans, and often they just need tweaks. They're thriving in many areas of their life, but there's one that they need to tweak or get some insight into, or honestly, sometimes just have somebody who's completely not involved listen to them. And I think the beauty of coming into somebody that doesn't know you, your history, is there is this ability to see patterns and point out things because you're not mired in their emotional state or what's happened to them. So you can see it from a much more removed perspective. And the feedback comes from that removed perspective. So it feels safe for the person to receive it.
It makes a ton of sense. And that's one of the things that I've told a lot of people. I'm like, it's like a really great friend that has an unbiased opinion.
Yeah.
That also has tools to help you get over it.
Yeah. You can see patterns in people that they can't, you could probably, people can see patterns in me that have been reflected that I didn't have, I don't have insight into because I am me and I just can't, I'm too close to myself. And so, when somebody outside, completely outside can really pick up on, oh, wait, that happened to you when you were 4 and then 18 and then 22, so that makes sense that you walk through the world holding that. And I think that can be really helpful.
And there's real power. It can feel a little scary at first, but there's super power behind qualified people calling you out on your shit.
Yes. Yeah. Well-intended people who you really feel have your best interest at heart. I think a couple things. I think first, the trust has to be there before you call anybody out. You really have to develop some rapport and trust. And then calling people out with so much love and with really good intentions is really what can turn things, can shift.
For sure. So what's one of the biggest lessons that you've learned in business?
Biggest lessons. Surround myself with people and in an environment that feels really nourishing to me, because if my business is thriving, but I'm surrounded with negativity, toxicity, dependency, I get too distracted. So for me personally, being really empathic, I have to have my environment and the people that I have close to me feel nourishing. I mean, it doesn't mean there's not challenges and there's not, crucial discussions, crucial conversations that sometimes going to happen. But that for me is what helps me thrive doing what I do, to have my infrastructure feel really good.
I can vouch for that 110,000 times. And then last but not least, what is one piece of advice that our listeners could implement in their business right away?
Healing practices is really what I work with a lot. But I think pulling back and assessing quarterly where I'm rocking it out, like what is flowing, what feels good, but also on the flip side, looking at where am I stuck, where am I getting anxious, what is not working, and then again knowing I have choice to impact these, especially entrepreneurs. We're not in the corporate environment. We can impact and tweak more of what doesn't work. So, for instance, recently I did this, and I'm noticing seeing clients back to back with no break leaves me at the end of the day depleted and wanting to come home and pour that glass of wine immediately. So noticing I want to numb out slightly. And so how do I tweak that? Because I want to just get through. I want to get back home after I see my people, to my son, but starting noticing how I felt and putting 15 or 30 minutes between each session and having time to eat and drink and sometimes clear my energy. When I come home, I'm again more present. There's no need to numb out. I want to be out in the sun. So that's a really simple way that I recently assessed, evaluated, and tweaked.
I love it. Something as simple as literally just giving yourself a little bit more time between all the shit that you're doing.
Yeah.
It's okay to just pause and breathe. The world is not going to stop turning, and the lights are not going to be turned out if you take a 20-minute pause between the things that you're doing.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal. Heather, first, this has been amazing. I could talk to you for hours, for sure. And I can definitely see a podcast version 2 of this stemming, but I want to thank you. How can our listeners find you? How can they connect with you and learn more about what you do?
They can find me on ownyourrevolution.com. Email me at ownyourrevolution@gmail.com. That's mainly, and Facebook. On Facebook, I'm at Own Your Evolution. So that is how magical humans can find me.
I love it. That just sends some goodness out into the world just in that one sentence. Thank you so much for being on with us today. This has been a joy for sure.
Thank you, Laura, baby. I so appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right, guys. And you know that to follow up this Thursday, you can join in on our Power Back, as we're going to extend on this topic a little bit further about protecting your energy. Your energy is such an important and vital part of your everyday life. And we're going to dig into the depths on how you can protect that. Until then, you can follow the Gutsy Podcast on Facebook and Instagram. And if you want to get a little bit more real about business, follow me personally on Instagram at @ThatLauraOra. See you next time.